everyone, it's me again. I'm Lena and I'm from the Healthcare Landscape group. In this video, I'm going to be talking about my main video with the topic voice processes of the respiratory and integumentary system. So I will be talking about four main parts. The first part is the introduction, the parts, the processes, and last but certainly not least, the photos that I will show you. Now, without further ado, let's get started on our first part. On our second part, the parts of the respiratory system and the processes. Now, we breathe about 17,000 times per day. That's 6,205,000 times per year. Now, that's a lot of breathing. And what helps us to breathe? Well, of course, the respiratory system. When we think of the respiratory system, we often think of the lungs, the bronchi, and not many other different things. But the respiratory system not only includes the lungs or the bronchi or the nose and the nasal cavity, but also includes the heart, veins, arteries, intercostal muscles, diaphragm, alveoli sacs, the larynx, pharynx, bronchial tubes, the trachea, the epiglottis, and many more. That's just to name a few. And why does the heart and the veins and the arteries have to be related with this? Well, the oxygen will be transferred into the bloodstream and through all parts of our body to help us survive, help the organs to survive specifically. Let's move on to the third part of the respiratory system, the process. Now, the oxygen enters through the nose or the nasal cavity or our mouth, also called as the oral cavity. When it moves down to our nose, it will move down to a tube called the pharynx. Now, that pharynx is where the tube will carry the air and also the food. But what will separate it? Well, there's a little tissue called the epiglottis, and that epiglottis will identify whether it is where there's air or food coming down that pharynx. Now, coming down that tube, it will separate the food into the esophagus, and then the air will go in. The air will go into the larynx. Now that larynx will go to the trachea, and then it will go into the two bronchi, which is the lungs. That two bronchi will go into each lung. One bronchi will go to the left lung, and one bronchi will go to the right lung. Then it will reach the air sac, which is the alveoli sacs. Now, the alveoli sacs, they're tiny little sacs in our lungs, and there are about millions, like tens of millions of these air sacs, alveoli air sacs, in our whole lungs. Now, here's a picture of the alveoli air sac or sac. As you can see here, it's just a model of how we think the alveolar sacs are. There's little tubes here. There's tubes here connecting to these little sacs, and in these little sacs, as you can see here, the oxygen will travel out through the walls of the alveolar sacs and into the bloodstream. The bloodstream, when it reaches the bloodstream, it will go into the other arteries, the veins, and then it will reach the heart. And from that heart, it will pump out with the other blood, the oxygen will pump into the bloodstream, into our heart, and then pump up to other organs. For example, our brain or our kidneys, the urinary system. Now, when they reach the brain, it will help the brain to survive because it brings the nutrients in the oxygen. There's nutrients from the outside world, and that nutrients is essential for those organs to survive. Then it will move to the organs. It will come out. It will when it go through the organs will take out all the nutrients, and what's left is the waste. And that little particle called CO2 or carbon dioxide will go through the bloodstream into the sac again, and then out of our lungs into the pharynx. And the waste that comes out is called carbon dioxide. We take in oxygen and then lets out that stuff called carbon dioxide. Now don't get mixed up with the pharynx and the larynx. The larynx is the voice box that contains the vocal cords. It's also like a tube. It has a little tube there. And then the pharynx. The pharynx is a muscle-lined space that connects the mouth, the nose to the mouth, and then the larynx to the esophagus. So what will come through the pharynx? Well, the food and the air will come through the pharynx, and there's the epiglottis. Epiglottis will separate those two down. Now that is all that I have to say for the respiratory system, and I want to show you this. Here's the whole diagram of the respiratory system. As you can see here is the two lungs, the bronchi, which will be here. There's little tubes that will bring near. The trachea, the larynx. Here, as I said before, this is the voice box. And this is the diaphragm. Here's the larynx. Here is the pharynx. And here's the oral cavity, nasal cavity, as you can see from here, if you can see. And that is the diagram of the respiratory system. Let's move on to the second organ, which is the integumentary system. Now, when you think of the integumentary system, what do you think of? Well, you think of the skin, right? Or our hair, our nails, and most of that stuff, metabolic stuff. Now, the skin, the integumentary system not only consists of the skin, but also other things called this, for example, the sweat glands, nerve endings, the erector pili muscle, blood vessels and arteries, hair follicles, oil glands, and many other different things. It also contains the layers, different layers of our skin. Now, as you can see here are the layers of the skin. There's the epidermis at the top, the dermis at the middle, and the hypodermis at the end. Now, the epidermis is the part that is out of our skin, the part that you can see. But it's a living graveyard for our dead cells. Now, where does our skin cells produce? Well, it is born in the epidermis, and it takes about a month or 4 weeks for the cells to go up into the epidermis, from the dermis to the epidermis, and then it will be dead, and then it will be carried away from the skin by either different objects on the outside world, for example, wind, water, or different things. And that is the layers of the skin. How about its processes? Well, as we move faster, for example, when we are in a running competition, a marathon, for example, we have a boost of energy, and then we go upward to our opponent and pass the finish line. But when we are in that period of running as fast as we can, as we become faster, as we move faster, our muscles need more energy, and that energy needs more energy. The cellular respiration will consume the glucose and the oxygen, which creates ATP. And ATP, that process takes place in mitochondria. The more you move, the harder it works to produce ATP. Now, heat produces as the cells break down ATP from ATP, ADP to heat. Those two things that form ATP. Now it will stimulate when the heat produced, when there's heat in our body, it will stimulate the heat sensors, the heat receptors, which will bring the signals to our brain, specifically the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is the part of our brain that regulates our body temperature. It helps to send signals to our other parts of the body to help it regulate the body temperature. Then it will send the signals to the sweat glands, and the cells around our sweat glands here. As you can see, here is the sweat gland, the spirally part here. Here is the sweat gland. And that sweat gland, around that sweat gland will be chloride and also sodium. That sodium, the skin cells, will push that two objects or more, that two things, sodium and chloride, into the sweat glands. And when in the sweat glands, our body, the water in this will move, the water will move into this tube. And that liquid will be shoot out into this little tube that is straight up, as you can see here. From the pressure, the water pressure will pump the water out, or the sweat out. And then when it reaches the skin, or the outer layer, or also called the epidermis, it will be evaporated by the heat outside of us. And that is where the end of the integumentary system process. So that is all I have to say for the respiratory and the integumentary processes and the parts. Now, and that is all I want to say for this whole video. I appreciate your time here. If you have any other questions or any other ideas and comments you want to ask or comment on my video, don't hesitate to ask. I would love to hear them all. Thank you again, and I appreciate your attention and your time here. Goodbye. I hope to see you in the next meeting or the next video. Bye.